painter. He has a very interesting personal life. I think he had like 3 wives. One of them he stole from one of his clients. He went through several divorces. Lots of drama in his personal life. But this is his studio. Frank did travel around the United States, back and forth between Wisconsin and Arizona every single year. It was like a pilgrimage that he made. So in the winter, he'd come down to Arizona, and then for the summer, he'd go back up to Wisconsin with his fellowship, which was a group of crafters, of designers that would go to just learn. So he had school, so to speak. And we're going to talk about one of his many phases of design, which we call the prairie style. Right? So Frank Lloyd Wright, again, is originally from that Midwestern region. He did primarily build in Chicago, Detroit, general, Midwestern cities. And what we call a prairie style is really long, broad, very horizontal type of architecture that was inspired by the landscape that was around. Right? The Midwest is a very flat type of landscape, and he used those horizontals and really emphasized them in his architecture. Alright, so this is the Roby House. It's probably the second or third most famous house. He was mostly known as a residential designer. It's located in Chicago, and because of that, one of the things that he really strove to do in this piece was to create a sense of privacy even within the city. So although it's in residential Chicago, it is a pretty small plot of land. You can pretty much see the entire outline right here. And because of that, he creates all these layers. He does create a lot of offsets, balconies. So you do have this outdoor space, and you have this indoor-outdoor feel in the entirety of the house. And at the same time, you have a lot of privacy from what's going on at the street level. So notice that it is, again, in plan, very long, very horizontal. And then at the center of almost every piece of Frank Lloyd Wright, you're going to have the fireplace. So you're going to have your fireplace, which is going to anchor the home. For him, and for several designers of the earlier years in the 19th century, they saw the fireplace as the heart of the home. At this point, obviously, they did not cook over fireplaces, but it was just symbolic of being the center of the home. So that's why the fireplace, even in a lot of houses today, is placed sort of, somewhere in between the kitchen, the living room, the dining. You want to be able to see it from those 3 places, which kind of form the core of the social life of the house, right? The public spaces of the house. This is what it looks like from the street view. So you can see a little bit of that sense of privacy that I'm telling you about. So we do have the bottom floor right here, and you can kind of see the windows peeking out just there, but you pretty much have this private enclosed space even when you're down here. And unless you really perch over that wall, you can't really see it from the sidewalk. Up here, all around the edges, he is known for having very deep eaves on his roof lines, and that create these really, not only great overhangs for blocking out the sun, but also these really harsh, long showers, right? So we have a lot of depth to his architecture, which further kind of portrays that idea of the prairie house, right? So it's very difficult to look into the house itself, to actually even see the windows of the house itself. But once you're in the house, it actually feels a lot like exactly what's down here, right? And then again, you can see that we have this chimney at the center of it all. It protrudes, and it's massive. It's not a dainty little chimney like we see on our traditional vernacular pitched houses. In this case, he uses broad, long roofs and very heavy and massy chimneys so that you can see them even from the outside, and it's anchoring the home at the center. As is typical of all Frank homes, the entry is usually very located, right? So if you go back to the plan very quickly, the entrance is all the way over here, right? So rather than having your entry on the front or that or even on this short end over here, you do have to go all the way around through the back through this entry over there. And this is what it looks like. And if you didn't know any better, you would probably think you're going the wrong way because it's pretty dark and it's pretty low. One of the moves Frank Lloyd Wright is really known for and very famous for is
Good looking, good looking. Oh, yeah.
To this conference, and I went to like 7 homes, and I mean, on 5-3, the ceilings were like right here. So we had all these older, really tall people having to crouch down, and the same thing applies to the studio in Arizona. If you ever go out to Callias West, I have to crouch down, and again, I'm 5'3", I have to crouch down because it's a 5-foot entry door. So he really loves to compress you and release you, so you get the sense of release, and in a sense almost, what's the word? You know what I mean? You get the sense of release when you get into the home itself. So on the inside, as I said, it's a very, very well illuminated space, all natural daylight, right? Again, like most modernists, all this time do not have mechanical systems to work with. So they do have to work with the elements. They have to control them and use them to the best of their ability. So what looks like a very, very dark house from the outside, you can see all of these windows, all of these glass walls, and all our lights. So we walk in here, right? We have our fireplace anchored in the center right there. And if we look at a lot of our homes today, especially the ones that they're doing out in Sky, all the luxury homes that Karen does, this is a very common move where you separate living areas from dining areas with the fireplace that's kind of just floating in the center like that. So frankly, right, different surface trend where we use it as a visual separation, where you can see it from all sides, but it also takes the sense of space, right? You'll notice that he does still have this brutality and design going on. He does design his own windows. He goes to a lot of modern art museums. There's deep framed with red glass pieces. He does design them to go in agreement with the style of the house. The colors that he uses, in this case, he's drawn inspiration from autumn colors on the prairie, right? So oranges, yellows. In a way, he is still a part of the Art Nouveau, and in other ways, he's a part of Modernism. But generally, he's kind of his own design. You can't really put him anywhere. He's not a machine modernist. He's not an expressionist modernist. He does his own thing. And you'll see in his architecture, it tends to look a little bit more outdated than perhaps what Corby's doing and some of the other modernists. But he was more influential kind of in the residential realm. So when you get into the upper areas, this is the upper floor. Notice that it kind of looks the same, right? He does have these kind of chevron window designs that mirror each other, so you do have a mirroring of the space. And then because this is a living room, like I said, he does create this nice seating area, a bench around the hearth, so that the whole family can gather around the symbolism of the fireplace. And then on the other side of that, we have the dining room table. Now, one thing that Franklin Wright is known for doing is he likes to design like a board, like a machine for living. He tells you how you should live in the house. So he usually designs his own furniture. Then when he comes back a couple years later, he'll usually have rearranged it. So what he did in this house and many other houses is he does nail the furniture to the ground so that the owners cannot move it. So everything in it is supposed to be used the way that he intended for it to be used. And this is one of the critiques that many people have of early modernists, is they're not very flexible. They don't really allow you to use the architecture. Instead, they make the architecture. Again, remember, one of the definitions is modern architecture has to have some kind of reform, social agenda that's going to improve society. And some architects, like Franklin Wright, take that very seriously to the point where they don't even allow the inhabitants to take ownership over their home because he's telling them how to live and how to have their things arranged. This is looking back again in the living room towards that other window over there. So again, we see that mirroring effect. He does use a lot of wood trim. All of it is hand done, right? And then notice that even the grills up here, all of it has a very kind of synthesized design to it. Every home is a little bit different, right? And then you can see that heat on the outside. So notice it didn't look that dark inside, right? And that yellow, what it does is when the daylight comes in, which is generally very blue if you're looking at it from the north, or in the winter, that yellow allows it to bounce back in a much warmer hue so that the house doesn't feel as sad inside and it feels a little bit more bright. Again, this is the outside, long, linear. Notice how dark that bottom floor is. And that is generally what is known again when you have something like this, you have to get very creative about how you're gonna interact with it. And so the home becomes a kind of machine, if you will, to bring people out and force them to interact with nature. Falling water is made for a bachelor coffin, so you're going to see a painting of him in a little bit. This house was created to have two pieces, guest bedrooms and then the house itself. We're not going to look at the guest areas, but if you look at this, you're up on a really nice retreat. Anyways, the way you approach it is over this beautiful bridge. And then just below the bridge is the creek itself, the water feature that of course everyone is there to actually see. In plan, this is what it looks like. So I did create these so they're a little bit more colorful and you can understand them. So you basically come in over here, again you're going over the water, and notice that the bridge, the kind of barriers are solid. So he doesn't really want you to see the water just yet. He does play a lot with the idea of revealing the water, of you hearing the water, but not seeing the water until he wants you to see it. So you get over the bridge, and your entrance is over here. The entrance into the house itself, again, frankly, right, makes it difficult to find it. It is very low, so it's going to be over here. And then as soon as you head into the space, all of this opens up to you. So the living area, the fireplace, the kitchen, all interconnected. And then the upper floors, notice that they don't exactly stack neatly on top of each other, which is why from the outside it looks like it's really interesting composition, very symmetrical, because he's created these huge cantilevers, and that allows you to have shading over some of these areas. And then for the top floors, it allows you to have balconies over those other areas, right? These nice terraces. And again, if you notice, the fireplace was right here. It's really kind of anchoring what is typically described as being pinwheel plants. So frankly, right, has a lot of pinwheels. And then they just kind of stack over each other in these different levels. And then finally, the studio level all the way at the top, right? In section, you can see these, how they interact with each other, right? So you have big cantilevers. We're going to look at that suspended staircase in a second. But notice that the home really goes over the entirety of the water itself. So when you're up there and you look down, you don't really see the water. You just kind of hear it underneath you. All right, so this is the entryway as you approach. Again, not very easy to actually find it. It's somewhere in there. And then this is what his entrance actually looks like. And I want you to notice that he's using that stone on the exterior and then he's taking it right into the interior, which a lot of modern luxury designers do continue to use this even today. And then just to give you a better understanding of what this looks like, because these homes are difficult to understand, that is the door that you walk in through right here. And then you would come up into this area, right? And again, notice it all opens up before you. The ceilings are all higher. This is often into the guy who the house was for. There's our fireplace. And notice that he makes it look very rustic, right? This is not a clean little fireplace, but instead he makes it look as though the stone of the natural entities kind of coming through the house, which of course would be impossible given the height of it. But he's trying to give this sense of it being a more rustic type of architecture, right? And notice he's using that exterior stone everywhere that you look. There are the signature on the colors, right? So he's reflecting the changes that go on in the coloring of the world around him. Again, he designs all the furniture. Many times it is built in, as you will see with many modern or mid-century architects. They build their own furniture, so you can't really move it, so otherwise it would destroy the architecture itself. There's a close-up of that fireplace. So he's using, again, one of his colors. Notice the way that this wraps around. Everywhere you look, he has a small little detail that ties into the rest of the site. These logs, for instance, obviously whoever lives here, well, in this case it's a museum, but you wouldn't be a millionaire. You wouldn't actually be having these logs burning all the time. They're just there symbolically, right? You could easily hide these in your kitchen so that your servants would come out and bring them, but you put them out here to give that sense of warmth. So you're kind of building a story. And then the most iconic part of this home is probably the crystal staircase. So when you're up here, you have this little stair that kind of goes down to nowhere. As you can see, it just brings you down to this little platform, which looks like this. And it's just high enough so that if you sit, happens in his architecture. So he does come out to Arizona, which of course is a much harsher environment than the woodlands or the prairies of the Midwest. It's a lot hotter, it's a lot clearer, you don't have as much greenery, and given this is a Sonora desert, right, which does have more cacti, a little bit more greenery than the Mojave Desert, but it's still a very harsh environment. And in it, Franklin Wright goes through this kind of change where he begins to adopt curvature. So in it, you can see he has a lot of circles, he has a lot of water fountains that have these circular or organic shapes. So he has this complete 180 where he begins to see the environment differently, right? He doesn't believe that you should only use right angles anymore. Now that he's exposed to a completely, harsh environment, he wants to incorporate curvature that is more often seen in nature. So once he returns back to the Midwest, you'll notice that he does begin to incorporate these curves in some of his buildings. So this is the Johnson Box headquarters, as in the company Johnson, which looks like this, and you can see, although he's using the same materials, he's using some of the same moves with the eaves, the darkness when you enter. The language of it is a lot rounder. So if you remember the turbine factory, Peter Behrens does have the corners be rounded so that he's giving the brick a little bit more malleability, right? Which is it's not typically supposed to have. Frank is doing the same thing here, but he's doing it absolutely everywhere. This is the entrance right here, so again, dark. You see darkness, that's usually going to be the entrance to Franklin Wright's buildings. On the inside, again, he's not using a stained glass in this case, but you can see that the lines and curvature of the glass is helping to emphasize this idea of movement on the facade. So that window would be right here or right here, these rounded pieces. And then the most famous part of this is where all of the secretary desks are, right? So all of these would have been different secretaries at some point, and then he created the famous lily pad or mushroom columns. These lily pads were quite innovative at the time. You can see he's taking inspiration from nature here, but the problem with them is they don't look like they should work. And so when he sent it in to build an apartment in order for it to get a building permit, they originally declined it. So Franklin Wright did have to prove to them that it worked by making a small sample. Just a couple images so you get the idea. And then they do have the glass in between them. These often do leave, so that is one of the issues they have, but they do bring in lots of natural daylight. So this is what Franklin Wright did, right? He poured his lily pad mushroom column. People haul those bags of sand. I forget how many pounds he put up there, and the building officials were like, okay, we'll pass it. We obviously see that it works. And then to further prove his point, he did send all of the construction workers to then stand on top of it. There isn't a photograph of it, but he did have 5 men all the way at the top as well. Franklin Wright was kind of a big designer like that, so he wanted to really show them that his lily pad designs work. Eventually it came to pass, and obviously it is still standing today. The other part of the Johnson Box headquarters is the tower. Now the tower unfortunately was a failure. By design, you'll notice it does have different floor plates. So you can kind of see right here we have a wide one and then a bigger floor plate, right? It has this alternating pattern. And the reason for that is he has circle plates and then square plates. Now the problem, because this was supposed to be labs when we were developing different products, if you think about the fact that hot air rises, those circle floors were always super hot, and then when it got cold, when dense air falls, the square floors are always super cold. And then the other problem was fire escapes, right? You don't really have anywhere where you can put the staircase in unless it's in the core. But a fire escape is supposed to be an alternative to the core, so they didn't really know where to place it. Ultimately, it didn't really work. It's one of his few failures. Frank again was mostly known for residential architecture. And although this is a very interesting idea, it just didn't work when you think about the way that air moves. But inside, we do see some of his furniture. You can see in this case he's using curvature in the furniture itself. These really cute circle drawers. Something that often happens is when a Franklin Wright property is abandoned or it's being sold, people do break into them like his architecture, but there is a whole group of people out there that don't study architecture. They are not architects. They really have nothing to do with the architectural world. And they're absolutely like fanboys and fangirls of Frank Lloyd Wright to the degree that they know everything about him. When I went to the conference, I met maybe one, maybe two architects, but almost everyone there didn't have anything to do with it. They were just super fans of Frank. And if you didn't know like one specific little fact about him, you would get mad at you. So it was a very interesting experience. Anyways, so that's kind of our last pre-war modernists. Not to say that they don't practice after the fact, but just to give you an idea of what modernism was looking like before the war. After the war, we begin to flourish the boundaries. So we now have people blending expressionism with normative, especially in Europe. The United States again does come out as a victor after World War II. They are victorious. So they have all of these modernists on their land. And then Europe is trying to rebuild. The rest of the world is trying to emulate what the US is doing. So modernism becomes the mainstream after World War II. At this point, our original four pioneers began to change their ideas. When you go through a huge war, you have a lot to think about. And you begin to, question your own ideas. So we're going to see a couple of them right now. And you'll notice that they're doing different things from what we saw on Monday. And then lastly, you have new generations at this point, right? Those original modernists are from like the 1890s, early 1900s. At this point, it is 1945. So the architects who were at that point, kids, have not fully grown up in a world where they have been trained as modernists. So they're not going to be having any type of inner conflict with abandoning neoclassicism because they were never trained in classical architecture. We're going to start with Korb. So the Korb, if you remember, was the guy who did the Savoie, this really clean, dainty plane up above the cruelties in all white. After World War II, Corbu becomes fascinated with the use of concrete. So he begins using it in a lot of his compositions. The beauty of concrete is that it is industrially produced, but now you get to just produce the forms, and then you can pour it in, and you can create pretty much anything that concrete can withstand. So you can begin to add one of those forms, stuff like this, from Ford. This is a monastery. So if you think about traditional monasteries, they're next to a church. They're usually very old, medieval type of architecture, and in this case, we have this ultra-modernist, almost brutalist piece of architecture, acting as a monastery, right? It is built on a hill, so it is one, or sorry, a couple stories on that side, and then we do have these huge floats that carry the weight of that onto the hill. So it kind of looks like this in section. And because of that, he does have to get quite creative about how to build these spaces. Alright, so this is what they look like in plan. As with all monasteries, usually they are cloisters, are going to be these donut shapes. We saw some at San Ambrogio, if you remember, during the Romanesque. Basically, you need to have a small chapel, usually you have living quarters, spaces of self-reflection, private, and then public areas. So when you come along the street, you have this little entry right here that leads us forward. In order to summarize, this is where you enter, right? And if you notice, it does have this kind of wall, and that's because it is a bridge that goes over a chasm right there. So he's referencing the medieval moat in a very modernist way. Once you're inside, it's honestly a very difficult to photograph interior because there's so many cubes inside of it, and it's asymmetrical. There's a lot going on. But you have areas like this, right? The point of a monastery is to have self-reflection. So you want to have a lot of areas in which you can walk around, in which you can be alone, and you don't necessarily see someone else for a while. And so what he does is he creates this really interesting roofscape. So though he's using concrete, you can still see his 5 points of architecture, right? He does have his mortise on the ground floor. He does have a free facade, where he does not have to repeat the structure. The plan is very clearly free. The roofscape is being activated, and he does still have rated windows. And yet he's using a completely different design language. Right, so you can just walk along, you have this bridge, and then you have a staircase to kind of come back down. And you can clearly see where that desired path would be. And then you come back here, you have areas of self-reflection or professionals, and notice that's where those weird kind of geometric skylights are coming in. And then on the other side, right, we have our circle skylights come in, and he does use a lot of color in this case. Can't really see it in this particular view. So we're gonna go back here, where you can see he's using bright reds, yellows, blues, colors that we didn't see in the Villa Savoy. So he's introducing them into his later architecture. And we're beginning to get almost hints of postmodernism through. We'll talk about postmodernism. I think it's like the last thing we'll talk about in this course, so you'll get to see more of it later. And that's the last we'll see of Peru for now. So that was an example of how our modernists were changing from before the war, where they compared this idea of architecture being masses, very light, usually white. And now we're getting into this later phase of blended modernism. So this is usually going to be championed by our new designers, the younger generations, the designers who were kids when these guys were already, starting schools and going out into the world and doing all these things. So they have grown up seeing them, and they are pretty much their heroes, right? They want to emulate them. And they're going to take qualities from both the machine and the expressionist forms, but we're going to see they're going to do it in a new way. They're going to become much more fluid, alternating between the two styles, bringing in regional variants. So we're going to start with Omar Alto. He's one of my favorite architects. You'll see why. He has amazing, amazing interiors. Omar Alto is of Finnish descent, right? So he does live in Finland. He largely designs in Scandinavia. So when you think of Scandinavian modernism, you're going to be thinking about Omar Alto. A lot of the ideas that even IKEA has come from his architecture. So we're going to start with one of his villas. Old picture, but it really shows, I think, a really good arrival sequence. So notice that our driveway is winding around the trees, right? So in Scandinavian architecture and culture generally, we do have a great respect for nature, keeping things there and not taking down trees just because they're in the way, compared to what we saw with Cork, right? When we put the Villa Savoy in the middle of that opening, there were no trees, it was just all clean grass. In this case, they are fully embracing the trees and the nature that is already there. Plan, this is what it looks like, so we're going to explore several areas of it. But notice the different floors that they're using, right? So they're using a very rustic stone in this area, they're using a nicer wood in this area, a lot of vernacular materials. But the thing about Scandinavian architecture is that although they're using modern forms, they try to use traditional building materials in order to kind of synthesize the two together. So you can see it a little bit better here, right? They're using traditional wood frames rather than just using aluminum frames. And it does give you that same sense. It's a modern window, right? It has a glass corner. It's just that the mullion is now made of wood. You enter right here, you have this really nice portico where you enter completely wrapped in wood, right? Notice that they do try to make supports on that side look like these bundled blocks put together, so it looks a little bit more organic. Notice that the steps are not cast into place. They are instead these really carefully arranged stones, so it feels like you're going up a natural landscape into the house. We do have this beautiful wraparound master suite up on top. So it creates a sense of privacy from the front. And then when you look at it from the back, it does completely open up into that backyard. Right, so there it is, wrapping around. And then as soon as you get to the private area of the house, you do have this huge window opening up into that area. This is what the backyard looks like. So we do have a more, modernistic pool. And we have a sauna. Now I want you to notice the roof of the sauna and the shed is kind of attached, right? So it does have grass on top. He does, again, use a lot of organic materials. He does try to make it look like it belongs in nature. He doesn't just impose it onto nature like Thor, Nice, or even Gropius would have done. Notice again the way that the tree comes in, right? It's kind of falling down almost, and he respects that. And then the veranda stretches out to welcome you into the home itself. So we're gonna look at some beautiful interior shots. Here we have a metal structure, but again, it is wrapped in leather where you would touch it after you height, right? Warm terracotta tiles. Notice the staircase is at this point floating. It is given a lot of liberty. It does look quite modern. We do have our fireplace over here. It's a symbol of the home. And then if you notice, this home is kind of divided into more solid areas over here around the fireplace. That's the winter section of the home. And then if we go back to that other image, you'll notice that there is a secondary seating area over there. That's the summer portion of the home, right? So you do have this duality where you can live in the home year-round and be comfortable because of the way the designer has decided to interact with elements. One of my favorite details is in the fireplace right here. If you look up close, he does carve this out of it, and I think it really shows how blended modernism works after the war itself. So although you do have these beautiful orthogonal lines in the staircase, you also have that really beautiful organic detail in your chimney all in one space. Right, and notice all the floor changes with the rugs, the textiles, there's a lot of warmth to it. The tone of wood that he uses generally, overall, so this is very comfortable in what we call cozy type of architecture. This is his civic center, or his town hall. From this view, it doesn't look all that cozy, but you'll see in the interior shot, it's really a great space as well. It's going to be also in the shape of a donut, right? So he creates this artificial slope right here, and he creates this high point in the center. So the courtyard is 1 story tall. So it's 2 stories on the outside, 1 story in the inside, right? This is what it looks like in Axon, so you can understand it a little bit better. And notice that he does make that landscape look more organic, like it's pouring out of that courtyard. That's my favorite detail of this building. So on the one side, we do have, concrete stairs on that one entrance. If you would like to go up that way, you can see it a little bit better right here. And then on the other side, you have these beautiful grass steps if you prefer to go up a more natural slope. And notice that he's not even using concrete here, he is using wood to hold up and retain the earth on that side. It creates a really beautiful contrast with the color of the brick as well. And then on the interior, we do have water features, statues, landscape. He brings the nature into a civic center, which is something we do not traditionally see during this time period. They tried to create very imposing pieces, lots of concrete. Nature was kind of secondary at that point. But overall, to being a Scandinavian artist, understands how important nature is to the people of the town, and so he brings it into their most important structure. On the inside, you can see all that warmth from the villa marina transfers into the civic center itself. Although he's using brick and wood, if you look at it, it honestly looks like it could have been done today. It looks super modern in a way that perhaps Frank Lloyd Wright's pieces do not. Right? Frank Lloyd Wright's pieces do look a little bit more older, a little more traditional, and the way that author also uses the same materials somehow just looks much more modern. There are the trusses that hold up the top of it, so it does create art almost with the structure itself, right? Notice that this is an assembly room, so they do have their town meetings here. And he creates a sense of coziness, even in a space that is considered public, right? In a space where you perhaps might be nervous to speak up or have to present something to everyone. He does give you a sense of comfort in the space. In the hallways, if you're waiting to get into the assembly or any one of the rooms, they are all around that natural courtyard, so you have a beautiful view. You're not bored sitting in the dark, kind of dingy hallway. Instead, you have this really wide hallway, first of all, so that people can actually sit in it. And if you want to sit on the edge, you can do that as well. People can pass. You have daylight coming in. You have ventilation coming in. He does incorporate planters even on the inside of it. And there is one of his famous door panels, right? So you don't grab it and it's all cold from being exposed to winter. Instead, it's going to be relatively warm, right? Because it's wrapped in leather. does create this hierarchy of spaces that we're going to look at in a little bit. We're going to start by looking at the Richards Institute for Medical Research of the University of Pennsylvania. Louis Kahn generally isn't seen as being as cozy of an architect as Albert Alto, although they are both a form of blended modernism. You'll notice that his work does look a little bit more, perhaps less user-friendly, and it's typically only really well appreciated by architects because we understand the larger ideas that he's trying to bring into the space. So, again, what does the building want to be? Well, first, he believes that there are served, and then there are servants. So what does that mean? This is a lab building, it's a lab complex. So everything in the blue are going to be the labs. That is the point of the building, and so that is the space that has to be served. That is where people are going to be most of the time. That is going to be the place where important things are happening. And so everything else in the orange are going to be servant spaces to the blue spaces, right? So the big orange one you can see is all circulation and storage. So all of your elevators, fire escapes, bathrooms, that's going to be there, and it's there to be a servant to the people in the actual served spaces. And then if you look around, you do have all these little orange cores, those are elevators and individual stairs that bring you up into the last space. And then when we go back and look at the exterior of the space, it makes a little bit more sense why it looks that way, because he's clearly expressing to us that each of these spaces have a different function, so you're feeling some as separate elements, right? So number one is going to be our stair tower over here. Number two, service towers over here. Number three is our air intakes. And then the actual labs, of course, going to be number five over here. So these shorter towers, and then four is the big service block. So notice that he does ground them with the service or the servant spaces. So the elevators come down to the floor to keep people up. But the laboratories themselves are actually floating above that ground level. So they're being held up by these three large piers with little supports in there. But then if you stand at ground level, that is completely open. So the laboratories are just floating up in space. You're underneath it, this is what it looks like. So you have a sense of porosity. You can walk through the entire complex uninterrupted. And then all you have down there is a way to get up into that area that is where the served people are, right? So I think you can see why perhaps his architecture isn't as favored as Albert Alto's. He doesn't do uniform, it's a little bit more brutalist. But nevertheless, it is still a form of organic, blended modernism. And then last time we're going to talk about our Salt Institute. So this one is in La Jolla, north of San Diego. It's over here. The point of the Salt Institute is to be a place of research, medical research. It was created by Salt, who was the person who developed the polio vaccine, right? So we had a huge polio epidemic at some point. Then we had this vaccine developed, it pretty much became eradicated. And so Jonas Salt wanted to create this institute to provide a place for more research to be conducted to save people's lives, right? The Salt Institute is probably Louis Kahn's most famous piece. And again, you can see, although it doesn't actually have all this lush greenery or raw materials in it, it does frame the Pacific Ocean very beautifully all the way at the end. So when you're standing on this side, right, you're coming into the institute, you have these massive walls of concrete, so it looks quite solid all the way out to the ocean. But then when we look back from the ocean into the Salt Institute, you can actually see it's very open and porous, where you have all of the different labs, all of the different offices, and dorms looking out to the ocean. This is what it looks like in plan. So the idea is that this right here, the central ones, are the actual labs. Notice that there are these very large open spaces. What you want in a laboratory is always space. You want it to be unobstructed because they are constantly changing the configuration of how things are laid out depending on what they are researching. So you don't want to have to worry about walls or columns or doors or anything being in the way. And Louis Kahn understands that. So you're going to see what he comes up with to solve that problem. And then all of these individual pieces right here are going to be aren't usually that high, but it's because the floor itself is actually super tall to accommodate for all the mechanical systems up here. And it's tall enough so that a person can walk through it. So it's usually around 5 feet, so you don't have to really push down. You can perform services quite easily. If you need to do a repair, you're not crawling in attic space. Remember, laboratories and medical centers do need to be attended to quickly. So this makes it easier for you to take care of the building and things and its functions at all times. So there it is in section and plan. Again, yellow is the laboratories, and then over here we have all these walkways that connect exterior spaces. All of this is the walkway that connects you to these offices. Now, why does he create all of these levitating walkways? The reason is he wants to create interaction, very much like the Bauhaus wanted to create these kind of moments of cross-fertilization between the students. He wanted to create that between the researchers, because there's going to be scientists of different medical fields in the same building. He wants them to run into each other and perhaps share their information, have a conversation that might lead to another discovery. So this is what the hallways look like all over the solid. On the left, you have the lab. Notice it is unobstructed glass all the way down. So one, you can see what's going on in all of the labs. They're not hidden behind solid walls with just a little glass panel, right? You can easily see what they're up to. And then you have these walkways connecting you to the offices over here. So once you're done for the day, once you're taking a break, you do have to come out to this exterior space where you might happen to run into someone that's researching a different topic, right? So you have all these interconnected walkways. And one of the interesting things that incorporates is the idea of blackboards, right? Made all over kind of cladding columns. So that if you have someone trying to figure out a really complex equation, if you leave it half finished, and then you have another researcher, mathematician, physicist, whoever, come around, they'll probably stare at it for a couple of seconds, and they might just be able to solve what someone else couldn't. So it is a board for, again, promoting conversations between disciplines, finding solutions that perhaps you wouldn't have thought of. In architecture school, usually we have architects as part of our degree, but when you have someone that is not an architect, you learn so much more because you see things from a distinct point of view. You're not stuck in a little bubble where you're only seeing things as surveying the designer. Instead, you're thinking about ways that other people experience the space. And much like that, researchers, when they're stuck with the same like-minded people, they're not able to make as many discoveries or think outside the box as much because no one is pushing them to do so. So at the Salk Institute, having moments like this allows you to do that. And then all the way at the end of it, we have this beautiful seating arrangement. So if you notice that there was this little line that came down, it does bring water all through the center, which eventually pours down through here and creates this fountain. So I think you can see a little bit of this blended modernism, right? Curvature, but then kind of machine aesthetic. He's using concrete and industrial material, but he's treating it in a way where he creates all these beautiful expressionist pieces. The building is telling us what it wants to be. It wants to be a place where you can conduct research with unobstructed places and at the same time share ideas.
Do you know if that body of water that is green is using like natural water or if it's like
Like if there was a creek there originally?
yeah.
I don't think there was, no. Although there might be, if you look at the
That's
topography.
what
It might have, like when it rains, it'll pour through here, but when I went there wasn't really like a creek or anything running. So it might just be when it rains, to be honest, yeah. Yeah, so that pretty much brings this section to a conclusion. Next time we're gonna talk about modern city planning, so keep all these designers in the back of your mind. You will visit them, you're gonna see their ideas, which you've already seen at the building scale, and next we're gonna see them at the city scale. You'll notice that although they have huge kind of reform agendas, oftentimes they don't really have realistic visions. So we're gonna be taking a look at that on Monday, and then because next week is Thanksgiving already, I think I have on this class syllabus, Wednesday's gonna be an online lecture, because I don't know if any of you have to travel or if you even have studio on that day, so I don't want to make you guys just come for my class. So it'll be online, just make sure you watch it before On Wednesday, it'll be a review session, so we'll kind of circle back to that to see if you guys want a review session or if you guys are good.